here you have a people, one race, one culture, and one civilization of people living in Africa who are Africans. I didn't say were Africans. They still are Africans, the ancient Egyptians. Had the only form of writing that has ever existed on planet Earth. Okay? Then you have to modulate through the process of time and come up to a time in history. And by the way, history is created by 4 components: time, people, places, and events. That's the substance and the ingredients that creates history. Okay? And I'm going to skip a little bit. They said that the Greeks had an alphabet. Greeks never had an alphabet. I'm going to tell you how the Greek language got an alphabet. After Alexander the Greek came into Egypt in 332 BCE, he forced the Greek language on our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. By them being a literate people, they took one of their alphabets and applied it to the Greek language. So the Greeks never had an alphabet, but it was the Greek language that an alphabet was applied to by the ancient Egyptians after the Greek language was forced on them. Today, as a misnomer, the Europeans have taken this alphabet, which is a phonetic alphabet, the last of the 3 alphabets of the ancient Egyptians, and say, oh, this is the Greek alphabet, making the world to believe that the Greeks were a literate people. Okay? And then they say from the Greek alphabet came the Latin alphabet. Okay? And then they proceed to take our ancient Egyptian ancestors' alphabet away from the ancient Egyptians and say, oh, this is the Greek alphabet. The Greeks have an alphabet. No. Then, I'll tell you someone else who honed in on our ancestors' alphabet, the phonetic alphabet, or the 3rd alphabet of our ancient Egyptian ancestors. It was the people who practiced a religion called Judaism. They came up and said, oh, that phonetic alphabet, or the 3rd alphabet of the ancient Egyptians, is a Hebrew alphabet. Old Hebrew, they call it. No such thing. You see, I would never allow them, or nobody, to take an alphabet away from my ancient Egyptian ancestors out of ignorance. I'm not ignorant, so therefore I'm not going to allow this. Okay? Now, I have to say all this to get up to answer your question, because what we're doing now is progressing through time, which makes up history. Okay? Let's go into the time of Johannes Gutenberg. Skipping a little bit. 1437, he created what is known as a printing press with movable print for the Europeans, even though the Chinese had invented a printing press with movable print in the 12th and 13th century. But here you have in Europe, for the very first time, a printing press with movable print. But the problem came to be is that he needed money. So he borrowed money from an individual who really was a baron. The barons at that time, which are Lombards, etc., etc., they were the ones that handled and had the money. Okay, they were money lenders. He borrowed money from Johannes Fust, F-U-S-T, at a high interest, which he couldn't pay back. So Johannes Fust confiscated this printing press of Johannes Gutenberg. And right after that came the very first printed Bible on earth. In 1475, the Old Testament was printed. This Old Testament consisted of the Pentateuch, first 5 books of Moses, and it's also called the Old Testament. The Old Testament, first 5 books of Moses, and the Pentateuch is all one and the same. This book was created, or this form of literature that's contained in the Old Testament, was created by one Moses Maimon, called Maimonides, in the 12th century, 1180 to be exact. Okay? So they used this form of writing, or the manuscript that made up the first 5 books of Moses. Moses who? Moses Maimonides. That's who created the books, but they will give you as an illusion to think that this is the books of this Moses that's connected to the religion called Judaism. But so it be. This Old Testament Bible that was printed in 1475 for the very first time was a Bible created and written for Christians, not the Jews. Because, see, the Jews had their Torah and Talmud. Okay? And, before I go on, let me mention this to you. I don't want any of the listening audience who is looking at this video, this film, to think in their minds, even though they have been trained to think this, that Judaism is a BC religion. Judaism is not a BC religion. Judaism cannot be predated before Rashi. Rashi, we talk about the late 11th and early 12th century. He was the one that formulated and created Judaism as a religion in 2 forms. His first formula for Judaism was the protocols for the barons. He was a baron himself. Okay? He lived in France. His family owned vineyards. It was grape growers. So these were barons. And today they are known as Jews. Okay? Now, this formula for them was created by Rashi, which is the protocols of how a baron should act, how he should keep his money, how he should treat the people living in and around the mass people who living in the world today, or the masses of people living in the world today. How to treat them, how to interact with them, how to do business with them, etc., etc. Then the next formula that Rashi created was the formula for Judaism, the beginning formula for Judaism, because he wrote what is known as Sefer HaYasa literature. Sefer means books, Ha means of, and Yasa means books of the upright ones. Who are the upright ones? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are your upright ones. That's what he wrote about.
According to.
See? Okay. Now, all this was created by Rashi. So you cannot put Judaism in BC time era. So Judaism is not a BC religion, and you cannot predate Judaism as a religion prior to Rashi. We're talking about the late 11th and early 12th century. Nor can you predate Judaism prior to the Crusades of 1096. You see? So now, here you have the barons in conflict with the Christians of Europe. You see? So this is where the conflict came in. This is where the polemic came in between the Christians of Europe and the barons, who are the moneylenders, who also are the Lombards. And if you go to England, you will go to a street called the Lombard Street, or Lombard Street. And that's where all your banking houses are today. Your lending institutions, the House of Rothschild, Solomon Brothers, etc., etc. That's where your money lending institutions are, right there today. That's just nothing but an offshot of these Lombards or barons, okay? But Western Christianity had a polemic going with these various barons through history, okay? And what happened when the first Bible was printed in 1475, which is called the Old Testament, that was written